So let me tell you a little bit about the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. We are a centralized information hub for educators, families, and community partners. We work with these constituencies to create collaborations and build bridges on all things family engagement. We do this by providing tools and strategies such as our in person workshops and our online virtual offerings. We also work with these constituencies to empower our youth. We need to know what our youth need so that they continue to be successful both in school and out of school.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, everyone. So we are here today to talk about supporting struggling learners. This is part two of a two-part series, What to Do Next. So let's get started. We'd love to know a little bit about you. If you would not mind letting us know where you're zooming in from, how old, if you're an educator, how old are your students, or if you're a parent, how old are your children? And then what is your role? Are you chiming in or coming in as a parent? Are you chiming in or coming in as an educator? So if you wouldn't mind just entering a couple of things in the chat, we would love to know a little bit more about you. Okay, we have our first entry, Lucinda. So nice to have you here. Okay, parent. We have Dr. Emma. Okay, we have a teacher, self-contained. Somebody from just reading from the chat here. Mom from East Brunswick, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we know that sometimes you're calling in from your cell phones, and if you don't have access to the chat, that's totally fine. Um, but if you're able to chime in, we would love to hear from you. Kim, mother of three, ages. Okay, welcome. So nice to see you. All right, we'll wait another 15 to 20 seconds or so. And when I advance the slide, please feel free if you haven't already to enter your information into the chat. Even though I'm moving forward, we would love to hear from you. Okay, pediatric community health worker, assist families with many needs. Fantastic. Okay, I think we've all come to the right place here. I'm going to move forward, but again, if you haven't had the opportunity to enter your information into the chat, we would love to learn about you and know about you. So please keep feeding it in. I'm going to do a quick introduction to myself, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague. My name is Erica Brenton. I have been in education for over 2 decades now. I started off as a New York City public school teacher, and I became very invested in the world of social emotional learning, which is everything from like emotional intelligence to self-control to self-awareness to executive functioning. And I became so invested in it that I decided I wanted to spend my career in that work. So that's what I've been doing for the past decade or so. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and I am a mom of two. I have an elementary school child and a middle school child. So this work is interesting to me professionally, but also hits home a lot personally. And just in my free time, I like to go on long walks and read and spend time with my family. I am going to pass it over to my colleague Kathy Malloy, who's going to co-present with me today.
Hi, thanks, Erica. So, hi, I'm Kathy. I am a parent coach, and I primarily support families of kids with disabilities, learning differences, special needs. And then, as part of that work, I do some educational advocacy where I really do focus on helping parents build good relationships with their teachers and schools and kind of create that community. I'm also live in Montclair, and I have three kids too who are neurodiverse. So, and that's sort of what began me on my parent coaching journey. My kids are just all so very different, and it was kind of eye-opening to me. And I love being a student, and I'm always learning new things about how to support families and kids.
All right, thanks, Kathy. And we'll hear from Kathy a lot about all things school and special education and everything in a few moments. We just want to share with you some of the things we're hoping you walk away with today. So, we're hoping that we are going to provide you with tools to advocate effectively with teachers and schools. We're going to introduce you to school support systems if you don't know them already, but probably get a little bit more in depth into them. We'll talk about requesting evaluations or additional assessments and how to do that effectively. We'll provide you with a roadmap, so who to talk to, when you should escalate concerns. And we really hope ultimately that you walk away with a lot more confidence. If you don't have confidence already, or if you have a little bit, that you have more to support your child academically and or emotionally. So we wanted to start with a quote and a short video of somebody named Dr. Ross Greene. He's an American psychologist and the author of two books. Actually, I think a couple more than two books, Lost at School and Raising Human Beings. But his whole premise is that children do well when they can. And so it's just a 1.5 to 2 minute video I'm going to play for you, but I think it sets the foundation for the work that we're going to do here today. Oops, let me get him going.
You know, there are two philosophies that you could apply to a child who's not doing well. And in the case of the children that I work with, it's mostly kids who have behavioral challenges. What we've been believing about them for a very long time is the philosophy called kids do well if they wanna. The belief that if a child isn't doing well, isn't behaving himself, it must be because he doesn't wanna behave himself. He doesn't wanna do well. And I find that that's not the best belief system. I find that it's inaccurate, but I can tell you what it leads us to. It leads us to interventions aimed at making kids wanna do well. How do you make a kid wanna do well? We are all very familiar with the strategies. You reward the behaviors you like so as to see more of them. You punish the behaviors you don't so as to see less of them. And you are now in the business of making a kid wanna do well, founded on the belief that he didn't want to do well in the first place. Important question to ask. Why would any kid not want to do well? I mean, don't all of us do pretty much the best we can in pretty much most of the circumstances we find ourselves in? Kids do well if they can takes us in a completely different direction. It's the belief that if this kid could do well, he would do well. And that if he's not doing well, something must be getting in his way. The most important role that an adult can play in the life of a kid who's not doing well isn't to come up with yet another, more creative, more potent reward or punishment to make the kid want to do well, but rather to finally, at long last, figure out what's been getting in this kid's way. Until we figure that out, we're not going to be very successful at helping the kid.
Okay. Just as a way of really grounding us in this work, that we are going to really help and provide you with the tools so that kids do well and kids do well when they can. So just as a recap, this is a second part in a two-part series. So the last part in the Struggling Learners 1, we talked about why kids struggle. We tried to help you to identify some patterns that may be lying underneath, and we really focused on homework. Today we're going to talk about partnering, effective ways to partner with teachers, understanding school supports, and advocating when support isn't enough. So, question for you right now, just in your lives, which one of these feels hardest for you right now? Is it knowing what supports your children need, talking with teachers, understanding school support options, or knowing when to push more for help? And I don't know, maybe one of these doesn't resonate with you, but just curious to know where you all are and what you feel that you're struggling the most with. So if you could put the number in the chat, we'd love to know a little bit more about where you are. Okay, so we have 4, 3, 3 and 4, 4, knowing when to push more for help. Okay. Knowing what support they need. Okay, so it seems like we really have the range. It seems like talking to teachers maybe is not the biggest priority. So that's good for me to know because in that section, I'll kind of go through it a little bit faster. But thank you all. This is really, really helpful information. So let's start with step one, which is starting with the teacher. And this is help. I know this just because I was a teacher before. So it's helpful information to know that the first step is really to work with the teacher. And then Kathy is going to talk about all of these things that you all put in the chat as your highest priority, which is knowing when to push for more and knowing what support your child may need. So, what are some of the things that teachers can provide in the classroom? Well, they can provide small group instruction. So that's basically if a child is in a large group with the rest of their class, they could be pulled aside in a smaller group to get retaught a concept or skill. There's flexible deadlines. So if everybody has an essay due on Friday, but your child needs a little bit more time, you can push for a more flexible deadline. Modified assignments. Sometimes my child will come home, and if some kids have like an entire page worth of math problems to do, he'll only have to do the odd problems, let's say. So teachers can support that. Just getting that extra practice. And then organizational support. So maybe your child struggles with some executive functioning issues, or it really needs help figuring out how to organize their tasks or their homework. That's really something that a teacher could and should support you in doing. And so again, I'm going to kind of go over this quickly because it didn't seem to be the highest priority in the chat box, but something that's really helpful is just to have a framework to think about how to talk to teachers. I think sometimes because this work is so emotionally driven, we can come at it from a place of like frustration or, we're very impassioned, but there's actually some really effective ways to think about starting with the teacher. And so we can think about observation, impact, question. So let's say your child is really struggling in school and actually genuinely hates school. Well, that's helpful information for a teacher to know, but what's more helpful is to know specifically what they're hating, what the impact is, and then understanding how they can be supportive in the process. So an observation might look like, well, I'm noticing that homework takes over an hour, or maybe it takes even longer in your house, or maybe your child is experiencing meltdowns during homework. So, whatever the observation is, what is the impact on you and what is the impact on that child? So, it could just be something like it's ending in frustration. He doesn't get his tasks done. She throws a fit, whatever it is. And then just asking a question. So it could be something along the lines of, are you seeing something similar in class? Or what do you think I should do about it? Or can you support me in this work? So I'm curious if anybody in this group has a concern that you're thinking about approaching a teacher with, or it doesn't even have to be a teacher, it could be a school staff member or an administrator. But thinking about this formula of observation, impact, question, is there something that you feel that you want to rewrite, or you want to say to your teacher using this formula? And anybody is welcome to unmute yourself or enter it into the chat. Just some nice sentence stems that you can think about are, I'm noticing, this is right, that's the observation piece. This is affecting, that's the impact piece. And what are you seeing in class is the question piece. So if you feel comfortable putting this kind of framework into the chat and writing some kind of concern you're having, we would love to be here to support you, or you can take yourself off mute and share. I'll hold the chat open for, let's say, 30 seconds just to see if anybody has anything that they're wanting to express to a teacher. We're happy to help you with the phrasing if you need.
Okay, I'll go.
Oh, Kim,
Um,
great.
and this honestly, my youngest is now in college, but I have had on many occasions, especially in the freshman year, we made it a point of introducing ourselves to the school counselor, and this was specifically in math. She started struggling academically. She couldn't keep up. And so we had a meeting, and we had the teacher and the school counselor in the room, and we said that we have observed that she is seems to be falling behind with her grades. That is not characteristic to who she is as a student, and this is affecting her self-esteem and her ability to be confident in at school and in the work that she's doing. And then, yeah, we asked, what are you seeing? And then we went a step further and said, so what are we going to do different to change this?
Mm.
Because this is not the student. Whatever you're seeing as a student, as a teacher, that's not a reflection of her history as a student in classes.
And were you happy with the response, Kim? Did you get a response back?
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
So I think first off, the teacher, I think, gave her a little bit more wiggle room, gave her more benefit of the doubt. And I think the issue was about the speed that they were going at.
Pacing, yep.
Because math especially is a subject area. If you miss a step, you're falling behind exponentially.
Absolutely.
So that was something that was successful, and I think for us, we've always found it important to show up and show our faces at the start, when as soon as we notice something that
Yep.
a struggle is beginning, because I've always felt like people look at kids as numbers. They don't know them. They got to get to know them, but they got to be invested.
Yep.
And I think that starts with families showing up to the table and locking in and making them look at that kid in a different way.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. That's such a great example of advocacy and coming at it from a very like kind and respectful place. So that was fantastic. And I'm glad your daughter, I think, got the support she needed, most importantly.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Lucinda. I'm noticing my son doesn't want to go to school. This is affecting his stimming, which is getting more pronounced. What are you seeing in class? I went through this and school didn't notice anything. He's fine when he's in school. Kathy, do you want to
Yeah, and I think
address
that
that? Okay.
as we sort of talk along the way, and I do think that one of the things that I'll communicate as we kind of go through is, I think as parents, being communicating, the things that we're seeing at home. Like I think oftentimes we hear that at school, everything's fine. And I think beginning to bridge that, and I think that's where the observation impact question is helpful, because I think you have to keep bringing it up, because home does matter while they may not think it does. I think as parents, we really have to communicate and really keep bringing it to the top, which is really the hard part of being an advocate. And I know some of our later slides really dig into advocacy, and we should loop back on that, because I think it can be really, really hard to sort of bridge that gap. And that's our job, right, as parents.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to that. Thank you so much. And in fact, Kathy, I think this is where you take over. So I'm going to hand the mic to you.
So we just are starting here, right? So I think for parents, if your kid has an IEP or a 504, right, you're probably already in level 3. But for parents who are with us today that are maybe just beginning their journey, we wanted to kind of just lay out some of the levels you might see as you sort of enter the system, the processes. So level 1 is a lot of what Erica talked about, right? The classroom supports that your teacher can do and should do when you have concerns. Then level 2 is where some of the school-based supports might come in. You might hear things like, and this is very different based on schools and where you are, but you may hear things like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, RTI, which is response to intervention, MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of supports. These are like levels that your school will have to sort of come in and support your kids. It may be reading interventions, it may be math, it may be small group supports, and you may hear those terms. And they are sort of, for some kids, right, those are enough. Maybe your child's in first or second grade, they come in, they do some tiered support in reading and get them, going, and they're on their way. For other kids, it's not enough. And then also some other school-based supports are counseling, some SEL support. Also, just to mention, In some of the resources that you'll get when we're done, I sort of created an acronym sheet because I feel like in the world of schools and special education and things, there's so many acronyms, it's overwhelming, but you'll have that tool after. And then when these school-based supports are not enough, or even in the midst of getting these school-based supports, you can also begin the formal process. And that we'll dig into a little bit more the difference between a 504 and an IEP. But just to start, a 504 really just gives your child access to things to support them in the classroom, which are a lot of the classroom supports mentioned, but really formalized for your child, and what they need. And an IEP is where we know your child needs specialized instruction. So just to ask, even if anyone has any ideas, and this would be helpful too as we continue in the chat, which level do you think your child needs now, or what level is your child getting now? Do they need classroom supports? Are they in the middle with school interventions? Do you already have a formal plan, or are you just sort of not sure where to go in that process?
So we have 1-3. Okay, so we do have an IEP currently. Anybody else have any? Where are you in this process? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Okay, we can keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. Okay.
Okay, so when to request an evaluation? So some signs might be that there's the teacher's giving supports, but there's just still that persistent academic difficulty happening. Or maybe you have a student who is taking forever, right, with homework and just working so hard, and yet the results are just not showing that. Or maybe you have the opposite student, right? They're just done, right? They're just not doing work. They're so frustrated. Nothing is helping, and they hate school and they're done. And then again, of course, a difficulty over a long period of time, multiple years. These are signs that you might want to begin to think about requesting an evaluation. And we're going to talk a little bit about the steps and things along that way. So what are the kinds of evaluations that you can ask for? So we'll talk a little bit about how to ask, but evaluations that are done by your schools can help, and they can give you the tools to sort of begin to puzzle out what's happening. So they could talk about, they can begin to look into what learning disabilities are happening, how are attention issues, processing issues affecting their school performance. So some examples that your school might do would be a psychoeducational evaluation, a speech, OT, physical therapy. They might do, and here's where all the millions of acronyms keep going. A functional behavior assessment. In New Jersey, educational evaluations are done by an LDTC, which is a learning disabilities teacher consultant, which is wonderful because they're a special education teacher. But then some families also will go down the private evaluation route. Those are often pricey depending on your child. If your child already has a diagnosis or does not have a diagnosis, you may get some coverage from insurance. Many families, I know their dream evaluation is a neuropsych evaluation, which at least here in New Jersey can be like $4,000, $5,000. And you get a ton of information, but it's a whole lot of money. So very often, I think most of us really start with the school evaluation route, see how that shakes up, and then sometimes go outside for some private evaluations. So how do you request an evaluation? So we have some simple language here, and I think it kind of also hits on the observation impact question, but it's like, I'm concerned about my child's learning progress, and I would like to discuss whether an evaluation might help us better understand their needs. So, and we'll also share a sample letter. But I think the important thing to know when you request an evaluation is that it doesn't have to be everything that you've done, documented and written. It can literally be just a simple paragraph explaining what's going on. Then who can request your child to be evaluated. So teachers can, people in the school, but very often it's the parent who's requesting this. Who do you send your request to? In New Jersey, it's usually the child study team, the principal. But again, usually that information is on your district's website. I know in the town I live, they even have like a specific email where you send your request for evaluations. But sometimes it's just important to know that just by asking, right, you begin the process of getting your child evaluated.
Kathy, I just wanted to say that we will have a Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
So if there's any questions that are coming up, you can feel free to put those in the chat now, or just hold on about 15 minutes and we'll have a Q&A for anything that's coming up for you.
Great. So we're kind of going back and forth, but I think it's important to sort of paint the picture, right? Because in your advocacy ladder, right, you need to always start right with the classroom teacher, and then you kind of go from there. In a dream world, right, we build this great relationship with our teacher, and we kind of go back and forth. And I think that's really an important part of what we try to do. But of course, it's not always enough, right? So then you kind of go through, and then there's often the grade level teams or a counselor, then the intervention teams that we talked about who might try some of the tiered supports. Then you may need to bring in your school administration and then the formal evaluation process. But I think it's important to sort of just paint the picture, because I think as parents, we often feel like kind of like we're swimming around in this system. And I think our schools think of things in a very kind of ladder way, and it's helpful to sort of get a sense of the place that we're at. So what happens when you request an evaluation? And I think it's important. That's why I wanted that idea of the ladder to be first, because I think this is, by the way, the New Jersey timeline, which is actually longer than a lot of states' timelines. But I think it's very important because I think as parents, we often lean on our schools to try everything before we ask for evaluations. And sometimes we don't ask for the evaluation until our kid is struggling and miserable and hates school. And it's we kind of end up waiting too long. So it's a little bit of a dance, but I wanted to paint the picture in detail of what happens when you request an evaluation, because it's a long process. So while all those things in that advocacy letter we just talked about may be happening, and you're waiting, you actually sometimes might need to just ask for the evaluation, because let's look at this. So when you first ask for the evaluation, a parent or school staff member requests it. In New Jersey, it starts a 20 calendar day timeline for an identification meeting. This piece is what's often not in place in other states. We have an extra layer in New Jersey. The team then will meet within 20 days, and then you'll talk about the challenges your kid's been having. They'll also want to know what's been done. What has the school been doing? What are the things that have been tried? And that's why, those tiered interventions, those things your teacher's been doing in class, all those things matter, and you'll talk about. Then you'll all decide together as a team what evaluations are needed. Once you decide that, you'll sign something as a parent, right? And then the district has 90 days to do those tests and to review the results with you. That then moves you to the eligibility meeting. So as you can see already, and I have it listed here, the timeline from you consenting, right, for the evaluations is 3 months. And then often the whole process is about 4 months. So in a school year, that's sometimes half the year, just in the evaluation process. So if your child was struggling and you were doing all the other interventions, it could be a whole year that was really tough. So I think it's important to sort of know that this takes time. And I think that factors in as parents to know should we just ask for an evaluation? Are things not improving? So that eligibility meeting then is where we determine the team determines if based on the results of the evaluations, if your child's eligible for an IEP or a 504 or maybe nothing, and they'll just continue doing some of the supports. While we present things as sort of like stages, and your school will often present things as like a linear path to this. It doesn't have to be that way. As parents, if you are concerned, you should ask for evaluations, because really, I feel like that's one of the things, even in thinking about what the one parent posted in the chat, I really think it's important as parents that we remember we are the experts. I know it feels like we're not there, all those hours of the day, but we are sort of the person who can put the pieces together sometimes in a way that other people can't.
Kathy, one question came up in the chat. I think it's probably better to answer just now before we go into. So Olga asked, do you think it's an issue that many evaluation requests come from parents and not school educational specialist recommendations? And that's been her experience in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think, and it's a hard one because I've heard even from a former teacher who is now working with families that like she was navigating also a very hard thing. If you can imagine, right? Some parents don't want you to, as a teacher, for her to refer her kids. She felt it was like saying there's something wrong with my kid if I refer them. But then she also sometimes felt discouraged from administration. And so she felt it was sometimes really hard. So I don't know the answer to that. I think it's, within the system, right? We're all like always operating in a little bit of a state of fear and not sure what the right choice is. So I don't know that they like disregard parents. I don't think so, but I think right, in a dream world, our teachers could do it, but I think they're also so overwhelmed and just trying to help kids that it's not always possible.
There's one other question, which I think is also, I know we said we were going to go to a Q&A, but I think this is the time and the space to do this. If you had an evaluation completed in one district, but you're moving to another district for middle school and new school, does that evaluation follow you, or do you have to start over with a new evaluation? I don't know if it depends on the different states you're in.
I think it might. Yeah. That I'm not sure about. Because like I know we have specific rules, say if you already have an IEP in New Jersey and you move, there's like a timeline, and then like the district can decide if they want to do evaluations again. But I don't know exactly. It depends state by state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there somebody that you would recommend like reaching out to about that? Is that just like in terms of a school-based person?
You mean in the new school?
Or whoever do you think would be a good person, if we were talking about it in New Jersey, would be a good person to ask?
I mean, I feel like, in theory, the child site team members will know, like, the law and exactly what to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the child study team. Okay. Good question.
So then from that eligibility meeting, very often parents, you are told either your child qualifies for an IEP or they don't. So an IEP and a 504, I think, are sometimes a little bit fuzzy in our heads. And just to kind of look at it quickly, an IEP is for students who need specialized instruction. So they will have individualized learning goals, specialized teaching, in reading, writing, math. It could be in many things. They may receive related services, which could be speech and occupational therapy. The great thing, right, in an IEP is you get progress monitoring. You see your child's growth. And there is a legal requirement to show that the growth is there and that it's measurable. The biggest difference, I feel like the simplest way to say the difference between an IEP and a 504 is that specialized instruction, which, for in like layman's terms, we see it as that special education teacher who is, adjusting the content for your child. A 504 plan is for students who need access to supports, but they don't need specialized teaching. So, and this is where a lot of the things listed we talked about, right? These are the supports that might be formalized for your kids. So extended time, movement breaks, preferential seating, reduced homework. So it's the same instructions happening, but with some extra support. Very often you see a lot of gray area and back and forth with ADHD kids. Some need IEPs, some need 504s. And that's where the evaluations come in. District by district, they have different sort of measures of sort of how your child is testing, how low they are testing to require an IEP versus a 504 plan. But that will all come together after the evaluations.
Okay, and we have one more very specific IEP question, so I think it's good to ask now.
Yeah.
if a child had an IEP in the district and they were homeschooled later and planning to re-enroll, is the IEP still the main document to review and start with your child's study team?
I would think, yeah. I mean, I think like it depends. I guess it will depend right on the timing and everything. And I imagine they may want to do, I mean, depending on the age and everything, they may want to do more evaluations again.
Okay. And it looks like, yeah, Kim has some great responses in the chat
Oh,
too,
yeah.
as well as this SPAN warm line, which also could answer a lot of questions. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of your questions, and we'll keep them coming. And thank you, Kim, for
Yeah.
having all those responses, and Kathy too. Okay, Kathy, thank you so much.
Yeah,
You
no
are such
problem.
a wealth of information, and I hope a lot of the questions that we have are getting answered. I am just going to go over. So, Kathy went really deep into IEPs and 504s and evaluations. I'm going to talk a little bit more about broader advocacy and some good practices, and then sometimes where we fall into traps. So, as Kathy mentioned, advocacy really works best when it's collaborative. Sometimes it can be hard to know who to be collaborative with because there is this hierarchy. But the more people we could get on our team, the better the outcome will be for our kiddos. Advocacy, when it's specific, is really helpful. So, again, that goes back to that. Observation, impact, question, statement to a teacher. So we really want to be very specific about what our kids are struggling with and be very, very documented and detailed. So you might want to keep notes from meetings. All meetings, you can follow up your conversations that you have with in emails. I would highly recommend that just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then, of course, if concerns continue, to follow up. And I'm sure everyone in this Zoom room feels this way, that like we are our kids' best advocates. And so sometimes we share concerns and the school will reply that they will, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And as Kathy said, it takes time. But if you feel that there's concerns that are continuing, that you have the right to always follow up and check in. So in terms of documentation, here are some tips for really helping to document your concerns effectively. So you always want to keep a timeline, right? On this day, we talked about this. On, February 2nd, a small group reading intervention was started. On February 12th, I had a conversation with the principal, and that can really help you and whoever you're communicating with to be on the same page about all the things that have happened prior. Having work samples is really helpful, and even using report card language. I think sometimes for me, my friends who aren't teachers or who aren't in the education system are kind of like, well, I don't even know how to say this, right? Like, how do I even frame this or share how my child is working or struggling? And so you could use these tools to support your language and to support the evidence you have of what they're doing in school and at home. Keeping brief home observations. So this is what we talked about and I think some of you mentioned in the chat, right? Like my teacher saying that everything is fine at home. And everything is fine at school, but you're noticing something so different. Just really, really being very specific about what's particularly is happening can really be very eye-opening to a teacher. And as Kathy had mentioned, teachers are so flooded with so much, and their jobs have gotten even harder through the years. And so the more we can feed them with information, the more full picture that they can get for our kids. So tracking those interventions, and we'll show you the sheet that Kathy put together about all the different codes and terms. But whatever intervention your child is getting, including that in that timeline, right? So even if it's not a formal IEP, even if it's not a formal 504, they started, this reading intervention on this day. They were referred to RTI on this day. So just as much information as you can, and then just saving all the communication. I think sometimes, and Kathy mentioned this too, sometimes we start the process too late when our kids are already struggling so much. So really making sure we're documenting everything and then saving all of our communications with our teachers and other staff.
Yeah, and just to jump in, the best advice someone gave me at some point was, especially even with depending on the age of your child, right, is just get a box and everything that comes home from school, that's their work, just put it, upside down in the box. So you have like a chronological, because I think sometimes as parents too, we get overwhelmed, like document, but like your child's schoolwork is its own form of documentation for you to use. So just really just making it as easy as you can for yourself to just sort of keep everything together.
Yeah, such a great that's a great tip. Thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
And then what are some common mistakes that we fall into when we're advocating? Again, we can just wait until our kid is really, really struggling to raise those concerns. So the minute you see a red flag, the minute you notice something, you should feel that you have permission to email your child's teacher, or if you're really close with somebody else in the school, like sometimes we have relationships with counselors, sometimes we have relationships with, somebody on the intervention team, just pinging them and just kind of giving them a heads up, or even just trying to understand a little bit more about what's happening. We can go straight to escalation. I think this is, again, a topic that is so close to our hearts. I mean, it's our kids, right? And so we can become very emotionally overwhelmed by what's happening. And so we can go straight to like, let's just, I need to get in with the principal, or the teacher's not doing enough. And we can focus on our frustration instead of really focusing in on those patterns and those things those observations that we really need to be documenting. And this is something that you all brought up. Number 4, assuming teachers see everything that's happening at home, right? So surely if they're struggling at home, they must be struggling in school, or you must be seeing this somewhere. But children, a lot of them will put on their best selves in school, right? And they'll try really, really hard. And then they come home and it's just like a full meltdown, or it's like a full just like unraveling, because it's so hard to keep it together for so long. And so, teachers just have so many things to think about, that the more we're able to share with them these very specific behaviors or things that are coming home, again, the more they'll be able to see the full picture of the child. Advocating alone instead of building on a team approach. So again, I think is something that happens when we become very escalated, right? So we can say, I think we are our child's best advocates, but we're not our child's only advocates. And so thinking that we just have to do everything on our own instead of creating a team approach, even when we're frustrated by some of the responses, can really feel very isolating. So just know that there's people who really do want to support you and do want to support your kid. They just need to figure out the best way to do that. And then just not documenting concerns over time. I think, it's as parents, it's like our job is hard enough. And then to just have to now do all of this documentation and making sure we're keeping like accurate notes on everything is just another layer. But in the end, it will be it will serve like a greater purpose for sure. Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
The only thing I was just thinking about the Ross Green video that you shared. And I think, I don't know exactly how to say this, but I do think as parents too, you inviting our children too to sort of be part of the advocacy process. I mean, obviously age appropriate, but over time is so important. And so talking to our kids about sort of what's happening and getting an understanding and sort of beginning to sort of create that, because, eventually, right, they'll be older and they'll have to be doing the advocacy themselves. So just thinking about, I know we often feel like we need to protect our kids, but how do we sort of bring them into the communication process and helping them to share with their teacher, or helping them to even see, because a lot of times, right, they can't even put into words what's happening at school, but sort of digging under and helping them, puzzle that out is such a big part of it too.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Okay, so we are reaching the end of our workshop here, but we did want to provide you with a few the resources that we had shared. So what I'm going to do is you can scan this QR code, or I'm going to put this link into the chat that you can follow. And I'm going to go there now and share my screen. but we just wanted to share with you some of the things that we put together for you. So this is called a Padlet, and it just has a bunch of the resources and information that we've talked about over the course of this workshop. We have our contact information, the PowerPoint from today. So everything that we talked about will be here. I think, Olga, this is maybe something that you had written in the chat is maybe like a framework that SPAN maybe uses. And so maybe there's something in there. Is there a link to part one? Oh, yes. Yes. Great question. Sorry, I'll get back to that in a second. But there's a bunch of documents in here that could be helpful for you, like, that ladder, the intervention ladder, scripts that you could use to talk to teachers and other school staff, a parent advocacy toolkit. And then Kathy, do you want to talk about these two?
Yeah, and then I put together sort of the common special education acronyms that you might hear. And then also if your child doesn't have an IEP and you want to refer them for an evaluation, a sample letter you could use.
Thank you. And then here's Ross Green's video and a couple of books he wrote. So this is available to you now and available to you after the session is over. So please use it however you'd like. The link for part one that you can check out, and you will definitely be getting this presentation and all of the resources in it if you registered. There's also a survey that we would love to just get your feedback if this was helpful for you. We'd love to know anything we need to do to change it. Please feel free to share that as well. But we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and bringing all of your questions and concerns and participation. It was great to spend this time with you. This is a series that we put on, so we'll be doing more next month at the end of the month. So just stay tuned for information about that. And in the meantime, you have Kathy and my email attached to this presentation. So if you need further support or there's anything we can do to support you, please let us know. And we hope you have a fantastic afternoon. And thank you so much again.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Kim put another resource in the chat box for the spam worm line. Thank you, Kim. That's really helpful.